I'm Nima Rajan. The amount of money Canadians owe versus how much they earned rose in the third quarter. Statistics Canada reports household debt was pushed higher by growing mortgage debt. Canadians owe $1.77 in credit market debt for every dollar of household disposable income. Well, there are signals coming from the Finance Department around Tuesday's economic and fiscal update, and they suggest it won't contain sweeping new spending measures, but will be limited in scope. The Liberals are looking to extend pandemic aid until early May to hard-hit businesses, and they will provide a $300 a week benefit to workers hurt by a lockdown. This is part of the $7.4 billion aid bill known as C2, and they're hoping to get it approved before parliamentarians go on their winter break at the end of next week. Well, with just 1 week to go before MPs head home for their Christmas break, the Liberals still have two key pieces of legislation to pass. As mentioned, Bill C2 would create targeted support programs for sectors hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic and a new lockdown benefit for laid-off workers. Bill C3 would create 10 days of paid sick leave for federally regulated employees and make it a crime to harass or intimidate healthcare workers. Bill C3 won unanimous approval in principle yesterday. Well, meanwhile, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he remains committed to ending all long-term drinking water advisories on First Nations. Speaking to a virtual gathering of chiefs with the Assembly of First Nations, Mr. Trudeau agreed it is unacceptable that some communities are still waiting for clean water. And he says for every remaining advisory, there is a project team working to bring it to an end. Mr. Trudeau previously promised to end all long-term drinking water advisories by March 2021. The Insurance Bureau of Canada says the flooding in BC is the most costly severe weather event in the province's history. It is estimating the insured damage is at $450 million. But overall costs are expected to be much higher since many people didn't have flood insurance. Flooding forced almost 15,000 people from their homes, swamped prime farmland, and killed more than 600,000 poultry, 12,000 hogs, 420 dairy cattle, and destroyed 120 beehives. Danielle Adams, the NDP member of the Manitoba legislature for Thompson, has died. The party says in a release that she died yesterday afternoon in a car accident near the northern city. She was 39. NDP leader Wab Kinew says her death is heartbreaking and that she will be remembered as a young, caring mother who wore her heart on her sleeve. Ms. Adams was first elected in 2019 and served as the party's critic for childcare, housing, disability, and poverty matters. Hospitals across Ontario are working hard to deal with rising numbers of teenagers battling pandemic-related eating disorders. In the last year, Toronto's Hospital for Sick Children has seen a 35% annual increase in admissions to its eating disorder program. This while its inpatient psychiatry and adolescent medicine unit has been consistently at or over capacity. Meanwhile, McMaster Children's Hospital in Hamilton is reporting a 90% spike in referrals to its eating disorder program. Experts say there are several factors behind the spike in youth eating disorders during the pandemic, including social and developmental interruptions. An elementary school teacher in Western Quebec has been reassigned from her classroom. Her hijab contravenes the province's Bill 21, the law forbidding teachers from wearing religious symbols. Parents and supporters have been hanging green ribbons on a fence in support of the teacher. They are also organizing a letter-writing campaign to denounce the situation to the school board and federal and provincial politicians, including Premier François Legault. Ontario will expand COVID-19 vaccine booster eligibility starting January 4th to all adults 6 months past their second shot. It is one of a suite of measures announced Friday to combat the spread of the virus. The province also strongly advises residents to limit gatherings over the holiday season. It is also urging employers to make every effort to allow employees to work from home. The province further announced it is extending its vaccine certificate program until further notice. The late Delilah Saunders has been given an award from the Newfoundland and Labrador Human Rights Commission. Delilah Saunders was an internationally recognized advocate for Indigenous rights and missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And she was the recipient of an Amnesty International award. Delilah Saunders went by DM and used gender-neutral pronouns before their death in Labrador in September. A spokesperson for the Human Rights Commission says the family used the name Delilah on the award application. We'll be right back after the break with an energy update, where we'll hear more about prices at the pump with Dan McTeague of GASWIZARD.CA. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break on Forum Daily. Welcome back. Up next, we have a look at energy prices around Canada. Forum Daily's energy update with Dan McTeague, Senior Petroleum Analyst at GASWIZARD.CA. Take it away, Dan.
Well, thank you, Nima. It's good to be here again and to talk about something that sometimes gets a little crowded on the national headlines. But gasoline prices are, in fact, back up in this country in a dramatic fashion. Really connected, Nima, to the fact that the idea that the Omicron virus would be as bad, if not worse than Delta, seems to have been put aside a little bit. And while there are other issues that have come up, it's caused oil to rally back from where it was, the low 60s, 63, 65, all the way back up to today, 70, 71, $72 a barrel. So we're not quite back where we were on November the 26th, but we're getting there. And of course, there is a lot of discussion about oil supply globally. The fact that Saudi Arabia and OPEC nations continue to raise prices for their product suggests that they're not going to really take this Omicron virus too seriously, and it will have no impact on demand. I note the United States, which is all important, still the largest consumer of oil in the world, saw gasoline prices return effectively to where they had been in 2014. And demand is now where it was pre-COVID. So we'd have to go back to pretty much February of 2020, almost 2 years ago, to see this level of demand. And that's with the Omicron variant. So it does suggest that we're in for some very interesting times ahead. Of course, we have the federal and provincial governments, but most of the federal government with two taxes coming next year in 2022. The first one, of course, April 1st, 2.5 cent increase where there is a carbon tax. The provinces that don't, Nova Scotia and Quebec, which have a cap and trade, will also see a similar increase of about 2.5 cents in 2022. And then we begin the process of the Clean Fuel Standard, which starts on December the 1st. Sounds like a long way off. That'll start at about 4.5 cents a liter and will affect the entire country. So while we're coming out of this issue of the pandemic, we've seen a very significant emergency disaster in British Columbia, and notwithstanding the fact that pipelines stood up, everything else collapsed. But both our natural gas and oil pipelines were in for the challenge. Testament to the crews and those who looked after those pipelines. But British Columbia is probably in a better place than it could have been were it not for the fact that those two pipelines, the natural gas Fortis pipelines, as well as the Trans Mountain pipeline, stayed intact. Gas prices across the country are going to remain stable, potentially to the upside. We are heading into the market's so-called Santa Claus rally. We could see gas prices move up an average of 2 or 3 cents a liter. If you go from coast to coast, $1.29, $1.28 in Nova Scotia, $1.49, $48 in Newfoundland, Quebec, $1.50, Ontario, $1.39, $1.38, $1.40. Of course, the West still between $1.29, that is Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta, between $1.29 and $1.38. And British Columbia itself, not too far ahead, extra taxes, at the $1.53, $1.52 range, with Vancouver staying pretty much in the $1.60 range. What I expect in the next week or so is probably a 2 cent average increase. So expect that prices will creep up a little bit until we see further evidence that the market is readjusting itself. One thing is very clear. There continues to be an undersupply of oil and gas, and the same applies for natural gas. Although we don't talk too much about natural gas, it is important because its scarcity in Europe and in Asia is one of the main reasons why those countries, despite their green creds, are heading back to using coal or to keep warm, as, of course, electricity demand and demand for heating oil continues to rise. What it means is that globally, the idea of a just transition or a quick reset is not going to happen. Reality, I think, is forcing countries like Germany, like Spain, like Britain, and even France to reconsider their green agenda. And for that reason, I think, practically speaking, we may be looking at the idea of setting these arbitrary net zero 2050 or a reduction of emissions by 2030. They may get certainly pushed down the road a little further as consumers will either wind up bankrupt or manufacturing will leave in those jurisdictions. Finally, a note about food prices. Interesting that we are looking at a very scary year ahead, potentially 7 or 8%. I think that's going to be a lot higher. I estimate between 15, 20%, if only because fertilizers like nitrogen and other products are going to be in very short supply. Farmers are telling me they're 3 times the cost going into seeding for next year. So fasten your seatbelts. 2022 promises to be a lot more expensive than 2021. And that means we're all going to be busy getting those predictions for gas prices. Back to you, Nina.
Sounds like lots to keep our eyes out for, Dan. Thanks for that. That was Dan McTeague, Senior Petroleum Analyst at GASWIZARD.CA. All right, stay tuned. We'll be right back with a look at the evolving world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. An update with Catherine Murray, host of the Buck Stops Here, is up next, so stay with us. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. Up next, we take a look at the world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets with Catherine Murray, the host of the Buck Stops Here. All yours, Catherine.
Thanks, Nima. Hello, and welcome to your weekly crypto and digital asset update. I am Catherine Murray. Well, we have seen a lot of volatility in cryptocurrencies over the past week. We actually saw Bitcoin down 14% week over week. It has since rebounded to about 48,000, just under 48,000 right now. But Bitcoin actually had its own flash crash a week ago Saturday, or a week ago tomorrow, following a very volatile week on Wall Street. We actually saw Bitcoin down by 20% Saturday morning, hitting 42,000. As I mentioned, it has rebounded. But what's interesting here is why? Why did we see such a significant decline in Bitcoin? Part of the narrative going on right now is that the significant decline we saw in Bitcoin followed a very volatile week on Wall Street, where equity markets and bond markets were selling off. That, of course, on the back of the new COVID variant, Omicron, as well as a shift in U.S. Federal Reserve monetary policy, where investors are now expecting the rates to increase perhaps sooner than expected. What's interesting in the narrative is, why would this even happen? Why would a sell-off on Wall Street cause cryptocurrencies or digital assets to also decline? One of the views is that there are now new participants, not just retail investors or people who have been so focused on crypto for so many years, involved in the asset class, but traditional long-only money managers and really the hedge fund community also participating. So in other words, if there's a sell-off or a risk-off day in the equity markets, they also want to lessen their position, decrease their position, liquefy, get some liquidation out of their crypto assets as well. That's one of the reasons, the narrative going on right now in terms of significant pullback. I'm not completely convinced that that will be, A, if it's completely accurate, but also B, if it will be long lasting because of the different aspects and merits of equities, and also, of course, the cryptocurrencies. I don't know that there's a connection per se, but that is, in fact, the ripple effect that we're talking about right now. Also, in terms of just keeping up on the evolution and acceptance of cryptocurrencies, a couple of interesting aspects to bring you this week. Brevin Howard, as well as Paul Tudor Jones, both planning digital asset and crypto funds. Also interesting here, the CME Group, which is one of the world's largest derivative marketplaces, launched a micro ether futures. I know there's a lot of new terms here. Basically, these are futures. It's a cryptocurrency future. This is another product that they're offering. And according to management, the reason why they're offering this is because there's the demand that they're seeing in terms of growth and the need for liquidity. We also heard that Fidelity's digital, so one of the largest money managers in the world, their digital asset received approval for their UK crypto business. And interestingly here, Meta Platforms, formerly known as Facebook, that their wallet called Novi will allow users to send and receive funds via its social media messaging platform, which is WhatsApp. This is in pilot programming right now. It's offered only to a limited number of people, in case you're not aware. But again, everything moves so fast in the crypto world. I wouldn't necessarily expect anybody to be. But it's interesting that they're going to be rolling this out or trying the pilot program, and in conjunction also apparently scaling back their digital currency. Now, of course, no update would be complete if we didn't also see what is going on the regulatory front. That should also be front and center in terms of everybody's mindset as to how acceptance and evolution continues. The U.S. Congress hosted a hearing with 6 crypto executives this week. It was the first crypto hearing in 13 years, just to put things in perspective in terms of where their mindset is as it relates to understanding it, figuring out what the right regulation is, and also the potential for acceptance here. The last hearing, as I said, was in 13 years ago, and that was on Bitcoin's white paper. Seems so long ago now. That does it for me, Nima. Back to you.
Some really interesting stuff there, Catherine. Thanks for that. For more analysis and news on the markets, be sure to tune in to Catherine Murray on The Buck Stops Here. All right, well, meanwhile, Environment Minister Steven Guilbeault says a promised federal mandate to enforce sales quotas for electric vehicles should be in place by the end of next year. Canada set a new goal that by 2030, half of all new passenger vehicles sold will be electric, and 100% will be electric by 2035. But last year, fewer than 1 in 25 new vehicles registered were electric, which is why Mr. Guilbeault says pushing automakers to sell more electric vehicles spurs the market to provide more models in greater numbers. Up next, we take a look at stories from around the world. We'll have more on the G7, the UN, a mosque attack in Nigeria, and a major F-35 fighter jet purchase when we come back. So stay with us. We'll be back shortly. Foreign ministers from the group of 7 countries are gathering for a weekend in the UK. UK Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is due to greet her G7 counterparts on Friday evening in Liverpool. This is ahead of 2 days of talks, and the agenda is focused on concerns about Russia's troop buildup near Ukraine, China's muscle flexing in the Indo-Pacific, and lagging efforts to vaccinate the world against the coronavirus. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says the regions that are most vulnerable to climate change also suffer from insecurity, poverty, weak governance, and terrorism. At a UN Security Council meeting, he said when climate disruptions hinder the ability of government institutions to provide public services, quote, it fuels grievances and mistrust towards authorities. He notes UN peacekeeping or political missions are in 8 of the 15 countries most exposed to climate risks. A Nigerian official said that gunmen attacked a rural village in the country's north, killing 16 worshippers at a mosque and kidnapping others. Local government chairman Al-Hassan Aiza Mazakuka said the assault on the village in Mashegu area of Niger State lasted for hours on Thursday. He said dozens of the assailants arrived on motorcycles and rampaged through the village, killing people praying at the mosque and looting. The attack is the latest in the escalating violence in northwestern and north-central Nigeria. All right, well, turning to Bosnia, where the Serb parliament is convening to vote on a series of steps that would weaken the war-ravaged country's central institutions. The Bosnian Serb leader is stepping up his secession campaign despite a threat of new U.S. and other sanctions. The lawmakers are expected Friday to vote on starting a procedure for Bosnian Serbs to withdraw from the Bosnian army, security services, tax system, and judiciary. That would be another substantial follow-up to repeated threats by Bosnian Serb leader Milorad Dodik to secede about half of Bosnia and join neighboring Serbia. Finland has agreed to buy 64 Lockheed Martin fighter jets to replace its aging fleet of combat planes. This in a €10 billion deal that represents the Finnish military's largest ever purchase. Finland picked the American company's F-35A fighters from 5 contenders. These included the Boeing F-18 Super Hornet, the Dassault Rafale from France, Britain's Eurofighter Typhoon, and the Saab Gripen from Sweden. Chinese leaders have promised tax cuts and support for entrepreneurs to shore up its slumping economic growth. This comes as the country grapples with a wave of bankruptcies and defaults among real estate developers. It was caused by a campaign to rein in surging debt. A statement issued after a planning meeting led by President Xi Jinping calls for maintaining stability. And it reflects the anxiety about growing risks after economic growth sagged to an unexpected low of 4.9%. This was over a year earlier in the quarter ending in September. Prices for U.S. consumers jumped 6.8% in November compared with a year earlier. This comes as surging costs for food, energy, housing, and other items left Americans enduring their highest annual inflation rate since 1982. The Labor Department also reported on Friday that from October to November, prices jumped 0.8%. Inflation has been intensifying pressure on consumers, especially lower-income households, and particularly for everyday necessities. It has also negated the higher wages many workers have received. New coronavirus infections in South Korea have exceeded 7,000 for the third consecutive day. This comes as the worst surge since the start of the pandemic overwhelms hospitals and depletes the healthcare workforce. Critics blame the spread on complacency by the government, which dramatically lowered social distancing rules at the start of November. Officials have asked hospitals to designate 2,000 more beds for COVID-19 patients. A report finds media freedom continued to be under attack in 2021. The International Federation of Journalists claims 9 journalists were killed in the line of duty in Afghanistan, with 365 journalists behind bars. That is up from 230 last year. China alone has imprisoned 102 journalists. New research from a university in Nova Scotia has found dogs can respond to an average of nearly 90 words and phrases. Researchers from Dalhousie University's Department of Psychology and Neuroscience surveyed 165 dog owners on what English words their pets responded to. And the study found that herding dogs like Border Collies and German Shepherds responded to more words, while Terriers, Setters, and Golden Retrievers responded to fewer. And if you have a cat like me, they respond to none. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website. Take care, Canada.